Hi everyone, and welcome to the Book Refuge, and welcome to Valentine's week. Since it's February, since this is Valentine's week, I might as well make the most of it and really give you guys some recommendations, some ideas about what I've been reading and what I've been liking, just to give you something to read if you're inspired by romance right now as well. So the way I'm kicking this week off though is actually with a wrap up, because the way that I film, sorry, I end up using my pen to do things. The way that I filmed my wrap up for January, which you all know I read a lot of books in that month. It, at that point, was the biggest month that I had ever had, and I've almost beat that already, and it's only the 8th of February. And the reason this is that I recorded that wrap up on like the 25th of February. So in the last 12 days, I've read 24 books. So what I'm gonna do, because those 24 books were all Kindle romances, I decided to start this with kind of a wrap up of what I've read there. And then if I need to, there'll maybe even be 3 parts of a wrap up, because I'm doing some traveling where I don't have to drive for about 14 hours next weekend. And so I feel like I might end up getting through a lot. And I thought I would wrap this up, and this is probably already going to be a pretty long video. But so the start of Valentine's week is going to be a recent wrap up basically, or a February wrap up in the first part of all the books I've read so far. A few of these I've already talked about in some recent videos that I did, because I was trying to find a way to talk about these books so that I didn't get overwhelmed. And I was like, whatever, I will just make wrap-ups during the month when I need to, and then at the end of the month I'll still talk about my stats as a total. So I'm going to start this off by going over the 24 books that I read in technically the end of January, beginning of February so far, and I won't talk about the books that aren't romance. I'll save that for the end of the month, as well as all my stats. So without further ado, let's dive into this. A few of these I'll be able to talk about relatively quickly because they've already been in other videos. Specifically, the Degradation series by Stylo Fantôme. I read almost all of Stylo's books in the last few weeks, and this series includes Degradation, Separation, Reparation, and then there was a short story called Completion and a short story called Reception. And this is a dark romance. It's second chance romance as well, between these two who, when the girl, I believe her name is Tate, I always forget, I'm sorry. That's the thing with these. I remember how they make me feel, but I don't always remember names. And I gave this series 4 stars all the way across the board. It was very good. It isn't something that I would call warm and fuzzy. That's not the point of it. And so it gave me the tingly feelings, but it didn't really like touch my heart the way that I like a romance to. This one is about Jameson and Tate, and they meet when Jameson is dating Tate's older sister. It's not really working out. He's not very happy with it. They end up having a fling that breaks up his engagement with her sister, and she's the one who gets cut off, and he still stays friends with her family. And then they run into each other 7 years later and realize that their chemistry is still there. And they enter into kind of this like degrading relationship, but it's kind of sort of BDSM, but not really. It's hard to explain. It was really dark. It was really fun. And we get introduced to this character named Sanders, who is my favorite little snowflake ever. But this was fun. It was dark. There's not too much else to say besides they use some like BDSM elements, but it's more so, again, like the degradation. Like, she enjoys being called names, and that's kind of where it is, and him being a jerk to her, but he's not a jerk all the time, is basically the point. But they're both pretty damaged people, and her family is pretty messed up. The fact that they cut her off when also she was the younger of them, because he was, I think he's like 5 years older than her, and she was only like 20, and like she's the one who got blamed for everything, so her family's kind of messed up. Then I read Church and Preach by Stylo Fantôme. Now these books were, I wasn't prepared. These ones I wouldn't call like romance. It was kind of like an erotic thriller would be where I would go. So this girl, her mom has married this guy, and he has a son who is about the same age as her. She's in college, and she's never met him because the marriage happened and he had been going to college somewhere, and he gets asked to take a leave of absence from college and ends up moving back in, and he doesn't talk to people. He's selectively mute for a particular reason. And that reason is that he goes by the name Church. And that reason is because he's silent as a church. Get it? The reason is he is a sociopath. And when he talks to people, it makes him angry and he imagines killing people. So because he's not stupid and he's not a serial killer, he chooses to not talk to people so that he doesn't act on those urges. So it's weird. He's a messed up guy, but he's in a way like trying to do the right thing, because since he can't control that he has those urges, he's controlling the urges. Does that make sense? It's kind of one of those things where like you see a really sexy serial killer like people make it and you're like, why couldn't you have just controlled it? Blah, blah, blah. Well, this guy's trying to do it. But so this is a stepsister, stepbrother. They haven't known each other their entire lives. So it's, you know, it's not one of those where it's like awkward that way. But her mother is horrible to her. Her mother allowed her to be abused and raped by the different men she'd been with in her life. And she's finally married to this really good guy. But her and Church end up in this kind of twisted relationship. I definitely would call it, like I said, it was like psychological. It was a thriller with like erotic bits thrown in. It was weird. I ended up giving them, I gave it 3.5 stars and then 4 stars because where it ended up going, and there's a ton of trigger warnings, by the way. Both for, sorry, I'm off with my trigger warnings today, guys. I'm sorry. My reviews on Goodreads have the trigger warnings in them. But there's definitely is for sexual abuse, verbal abuse, self-harm. Self-harm is the big one because this girl, she has a lot of struggles with that. But it was really cool to watch the mental state between the first and the second book. And that's why I like the second book better, because our main character in the first one, she's kind of a pushover. And in more so than just liking a little bit of like dom sub stuff, more so in like she is literally having some mental issues. And you really shouldn't be in those relationships if you have that level of that, because then you're not just doing this for pleasure, you're doing it to hurt yourself, and it's just not the best. But it was fascinating and I couldn't put them down. I just hesitate to recommend because, you know. Then by her, I read The Bad Ones, which took it further, and these teens, this is like new adult, they do end up killing lots of people, and I wouldn't call them serial killers because of how it happens, and in like the criminal mind sense, they're not, but a lot of people die and they revel in it and have sex near the places where they've killed these people, and of course they're all bad people, but people that maybe should have went to jail and not got murdered violently. So I gave that one 2.5 stars, and I only finished it because, again, this author is very compelling. I just, when it was over, I just felt icky, and I was like, I can't read stories like this anymore, and I shifted away from reading her because it just got a little too intense. And it was not the same, like, light, like, in a way it's strange, but, like, the Degradation series, it was more lighthearted because it was for pleasure that they were acting like this, and it was just like a kink that they liked. It wasn't because they were so mentally messed up that they wanted to murder people. Like, when you project your like pain-seeking things onto other people, that's when I'm like not into it, because you're not just affecting yourself, you're literally killing people because of your kink, and then that's murder. So shifted away from her. And then I read another Alessandra Tor, who wrote the marriage duology that I really liked in January. And I read Black Lies by her, which is about, oh, I don't want to spoil it. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It's about this girl who, she's a trust fund baby. She's rich. She just came into her trust fund, and she meets this man who he is a boy genius. I mean, he's not a boy now, but he was a boy genius, so he's uber rich. And they start having a relationship, and all of his family members keep warning her away from him. And then she meets another man at the same time she's with him and is having an affair on him. And I don't like books with affairs, so remember that. I don't like cheating. but this one is fascinating. That's all I can say. I do not want to spoil this for you, but I think you should trust me. And I mean, go ahead and look it up. It's Black Lives by Alessandra Torre. Either go ahead and look it up or just give it a try and trust me that I wouldn't lead you into a story. Well, maybe I would. Who knows? But try it before, even if you don't like cheating. Because I don't like cheating. I would never approve of it. Check it out. Then, again, I already talked about these. I read 4 more books in the Voyeur series by Fiona Cole. So I read books 2 through 5. So there is, which I already read, Voyeur, and there was Lovers, Savior, Another, and Liar. And I gave these all either 4 or 4.5 stars. Oh no, I gave Savior 3 stars because that hero was legitimately a jerk. I talked about all of these in recent Kindle Unlimited, so I will put a card up there where you can hear more in detail about what they're about. But the Voyeur is a sex club where it's more of like a porn club where you can watch different scenarios that you pick, so it's kind of like a choose your own porn situation. And the first one is about people actually performing in it, and then the other ones are about the people who like run it, and then their personal lives. And in those stories, there was an age gap one. There was a Menage story, there was a secret baby, and there was a girl who gets rescued from possible sex trafficking. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and I loved it. There's one more in the series that's coming out, and I can't wait to read it. But you should check out my more in detail of those because I really liked it. And then another book by Fiona Cole I read was Shame and Make It to the Altar. And so Shame was these 2 kids discovering BDSM together. They've been friends their whole lives, and they discover that they both have complementing kinks, where the girl really wants to be dominated and her friend wants to dominate. But it's told at 3 different points in their life, because when they're first figuring it out, things don't go exactly well, and the guy gets scared because he's scared of his desires, and he's also afraid that he's not in better control. And then they run into each other 5 years later, and their lives are a little more complicated, but also they know more specifically what they like. They've had unsatisfying partners up to that point. Nobody really understands what they want the way the other one does. But then some things happen and it gets messed up. And then we meet them 2 years after that. I think it's 2 years more, where they really need to see if this is going to work out or not. And then Make It to the Altar is it's a novella, but it's basically an extended epilogue novella about where they're at a couple years after that even. And this was really beautiful. I gave this one 4.5 and then 4 stars because I really loved them discovering it together and what that looked like. And they were best friends who live next door, so there was a little bit of kind of peeping on each other and then realizing that they like the same things. And I thought it was really sweet to kind of see them both discovering it, because a lot of times it's one or the other. This person knows they love to be a sub and they're finding a new dom, or this person has these desires to be dominated but doesn't know what that looks like, or if they're just crazy or whatever, and they meet someone who teaches them. So there's always this and I like that they were both learning it together. And I really liked that the dom, that he was so careful and always checking in, even to the point where it was almost annoying, but yet that's sweet, because it's I never want to step over the line with you because I value you. And that just made it really cute, because not just cute, just sexy, because there's that trust, which is the whole point of BDSM, is that you can't have it be the most satisfying when you don't trust the person. And it was guys, so good. So good. So then I started this series by Kay Webster, which Kay Webster is writing the Wicked Villains series, which I am really liking. But she had this series of it's little short novellas. And I read the first one, Coach Long, which is a taboo about a coach and his player. And it was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, everybody was legal, but there's just something about it. And there was some trigger warnings in there for like actual abuse, because there's another like teacher at the school who's actually abusing people. And then see the next one, which I started the next one and then I stopped the series because I just didn't like how taboo it was. I know that sounds weird, but I like age gaps, but when it's in a novella situation and it's a taboo thing, I just don't think you can do novella taboos in a satisfying manner when they're like age gap, or when they're like a taboo that can be dangerous when it's done wrong. Does that make sense? Because like one of my favorite stories is Dark Notes, but that is a very long book, and the author takes a long time to like build up these people together and the situation the heroine's in. She needs someone like this hero, and even though there's an age gap, like he's the one who understands her, and anybody else would have just ruined it. And in this case, I think it's sexy, but I just felt gross. And I don't read age gaps where they make me feel gross. Like, I need to feel safe reading it, and I need to feel that like the author made this choice because it's the only way to tell this story and not just to make it taboo. So that was my problem. So I gave that one 3.5 stars because it was pretty sexy and fun, but then I stopped the series because I was like, I don't like where we're going with these. Then I read a 5-star, and that was Muffin Top by Avery Flynn. And this wasn't KU. I actually bought this one on Kindle because I pulled this one for a Romanceopoly pick, and that was to read one where the hero was a firefighter or policeman. And in this one, we have Lucy and Frankie. Sorry, I had to think. And Frankie is a firefighter. This is part of a series. But I read this one because it has an overweight heroine. And after reading a really like shitty BBW last month, this one I had heard a lot of good things about, and I wanted to give it a try, and it was much better. There was so much fat shaming and just horrible stuff in the one I read last month, and I just don't want to read that. Like, it was ultimately about there being a happily ever after, but the hero still thought such like horrible things until he didn't anymore, until they're having sex and he's liking it and realizes, oh, maybe I like this person. And he was just such an ass. And it took him so long to realize it. And in this case of this one, Frankie comes upon someone being a horrible dick to Lucy and like telling her she should have a salad instead of a burger and just being an asshole to her. And Lucy can handle herself, and she's giving this guy the what for of like, I'm way more successful than you. You're working at practically a Burger King and I'm this successful, blah, blah, blah. But Frankie, who knows her because his brother and her sister are married, so you know, they are going to get married, so they know each other. And he walks up and pretends that they're on a date and just like saves her. And he's not thinking, and he's actually realized that he's kind of a man whore. And so he's trying to take a break from hookups. And so when he is spending, like when he's talking with Lucy, it's not because she is plus size. He literally is trying not to hook up with people, and so he's not looking at her that way. But she is supposed to be going to her high school reunion, but she's not going to go. And Frankie convinces her to because she's very successful. But she's like, but I'm not the kind of successful that they will think is successful because I'm not married and I'm still plus size and they're going to think things about me. And Frankie's like, screw that. I'll come with. I'll pretend to be your date and we'll blow them away. And she's like, okay, fine, but we have to keep this platonic. And he's like, that's fine because I'm going on a sex ban or whatever. And so it's all the fun tropes that you like. It's like bed sharing, it's fake dating, it's I am like getting attracted to your personality and your heart before sleeping together. And it was super steamy and just, it was great. It was so great. And it was so funny and it was so much fun. And this was a 5-star. Totally for me. They're adorable. They're freaking adorable. And I just want to squeeze them and love them. And you should try Muffin Top because it was amazing. Then I read Two Becomes Three by Jake Cartwright. This was just a quick little Menage, MMF Menage novella. And I really liked this because it wasn't like, usually Menage are like pretty dark and it's like, ooh, we're trying something super taboo and like I can't handle it. And this was so funny and so fun. And so we have this couple and they've been together for quite a while, and they have this best friend, and I can't remember anybody's names. I'm sorry. Even though I love this book, I'm sorry I can't remember their names. And he's just been broken up with by his girlfriend. And so they were going on a vacation and they invite him to come with them. And he's like, you sure you want me to come on like your sexy vacation with you guys? And they're like, yeah, we do. Like the place we're staying is huge. There's room for you. Come. Well, they end up wanting to try something new, and they end up wanting to try sleeping together, and they do. And then they decide that this is awesome. Actually, let's be in a relationship together. And I just loved it. And there was none of like the super angst that can happen in that, where it's like, oh, well, what if we want to have a family? What if the two of us want to get married, but then like you aren't there? And there just wasn't any of that issues. And it's a novella. Those issues maybe come up later, as they usually do in a Menage, you know, like what's going on. But I really liked it. I thought it was super sexy, super fun, unangsty. I love angst, but this one was cute and fun, and I really liked it. All right, getting to the good stuff, guys. I've just finished some really good books. So next, I had another 2 5-stars, and that was reading Him by Elle Kennedy and Serena Bowen. This was another pick because of Romanceopoly, and I'm so glad I read it, guys. Like, I can't even. So, secret. I haven't read any gay romances where it's just 2 guys, okay? As I just said, I've read some MMF. I've read a lot of MMF, Menage, and I've liked most of it. But I've never read just a gay romance. I just haven't had one suggested to me. I just haven't been in the mood for it. I didn't think I'd want to try it. But Him came up as a choice for, I think I picked it as a sports romance because it's about 2 hockey players. That was another reason I didn't want to read it, because I don't enjoy sports romances. But I gave this a try. This is also my first Elle Kennedy. And this is about these 2 friends who, oh my gosh, I just want to gush because they're so cute. They have been friends since they were like 13 years old. And, oh my God, this is about Wes and Jamie are their names. And Wes had a crush on Jamie for a very long time. And they become counselors with each other at this camp. And they end up doing this bet where whoever loses has to give the other one a blowjob. And Wes perfectly loses because he really wants to do that to his friend. And when he does it, he realizes, 1, that he's gay, and 2, that he's in love with his friend. And he doesn't want to force that on his friend. He also feels that he probably forced it on his friend, even though he definitely didn't. His friend doesn't feel like he's gay, but he also wasn't like weirded out by it or anything. It was fun. But then Wes doesn't talk to Jamie for 5 years. So fast forward, they're both playing college hockey, and they run into each other as opposing teams in the Frozen Four or something. And please don't check what I know about the hockey part. That is the least interesting part of this story for me, okay? I'm sorry. And they end up running into each other and talking, and Wes admits that he was embarrassed and felt like he'd taken advantage of him. And Jamie's like, you asshole. I was okay with it. I'm just as strong as you. I would have kicked you in the nuts if I didn't want you to touch me that way. It was fine. And now you ruined our friendship instead of talking to me. And Wes is like, you're right. I'm sorry. Can we be friends again? So they end up as coaches this time at this camp. Wes is going to be joining a pro team in Canada, and Jamie is either going to he's also going to join a team, or he could be a coach in the same town. And they end up, so Jamie, he realizes that he is bisexual and that he is actually more into Wes than into his current hookup. He doesn't have a girlfriend, but he has women that he hooks up with. And he realizes that he really wants Wes. And so for the time that they're at camp, they decide that they are going to sleep with each other. And they do. But they really quickly realize that, number 1, Wes has been in love with Jamie this whole time. He's never had any other serious relationships. He's been like open with his family and his like teams in the past. Like they know he's gay, but like the world as a whole doesn't know. And he's never had any like serious boyfriends because of that. And so him and Jamie have to decide if it's going to work out and if it's worth, you know, risking their friendship, risking their careers to be together. And then, spoiler alert, they do, because there's a sequel called Us, which takes place during about like, it starts like 2 months after and then takes place for about a year, and it's them dealing with all those things that I said. And they were both 5 stars, and they both broke my heart and healed it, and it was beautiful. And because I read that gay romance and loved it, I looked up some other ones. So the rest of the books that I've read so far have been those. So I started this series called the Damaged series by Krista and Becca Ritchie. These, I guess, there's a bunch of prequel novels to these that I haven't, well, not prequel, like there was a series about these characters' parents. And I will go back and read those, but right now I'm reading this series. And the first 3 in this series are about Maximoff and Fargo. And Maximoff is one of the children of these famous people in the books I haven't read yet. And he has had a thing for his mom's bodyguard for the last 3 years. So he's 22. And his mom's bodyguard gets reassigned to be his bodyguard. And who he knows is gay. And Maximoff is bisexual, and he has been dreaming and fantasizing about Maximoff for the last like 5 years, basically, because he knew him before he was his mom's bodyguard, and now he's gonna be his bodyguard. And he is really worried about that because Maximoff never has any serious relationships because of the pressure that love interest would be under. So he only has basically one night stands, and those people have to sign an NDA. They get to be with him, and then they're gone. And so he's a little bit nervous about the man that he has been obsessed over being the one in charge of his one night stands, basically. And Fargo has been into Maximoff for a little while as well. And he's willing to take the heat for anything. But of course he wants it to be Maximoff's choice. And these 2 boys, I love it. I love them. So I gave the first one 4.5 stars and the second one 4 stars. And I'm reading the third one right now. So the first one is Damaged Like Us, and then it's Lovers Like Us, and I'm reading Alphas Like Us right now. And then it's so cool because there's all these, there's like a bodyguard for each one of the kids and the parents. And so I definitely think there's going to be some other hookups between bodyguards and clients, but we'll see. I'm not there yet. And I'm excited. I love it. And then I'm also currently reading the Temptation series by Ella Frank. And so I've read Try, and I'm in the middle of Take right now. And these are about this formerly straight bartender. His name is, I just forgot his name. Oh my God, why do I do this? What's his name? His name is Tate. And this lawyer named Logan, who his firm, not Logan specifically, but his firm handled Tate's divorce. And Logan decides that he's in to Tate, and he kind of relentlessly pursues him. So I'm not a huge fan, granted, okay? I've only read at this point like 8 books and 3 different couples that are gay couples, but I'm not a huge fan of the thought of like turning someone. And I didn't know how I'd feel about it. However, Tate is completely in control of himself. And though Logan is tempting him and trying to get him to try him out, Tate is still completely in control of himself, but he is very interested in Logan and he's willing to give it a go. However, there's a lot of roadblocks in their way. Logan actually has a lot of damage of being abandoned previously by specifically this one lover who really messed him up. And Tate is really afraid that Logan is just trying to turn him and then will ditch him. So I'm in the second book right now, like I said, and they're really struggling through that, as well as Tate was married. He's been straight. The only man he's ever been attracted to is this one. And his family currently isn't taking it very well, which I can imagine that. And of course, they have his family going overboard. But I can see why it'd be confusing to his family where he had a wife and they've never heard of this before. And then all of a sudden, within like 2 weeks, he brings a man home. So not that they should have treated him that way, because I don't believe in that at all. But I imagine since there's 5 books in this series, that will work through some of that. That's my hope. So we'll be updating about that. But so far I've given both of those 4 stars. I'm hoping it gets better. It like builds even better. It's just that first one was hard just for the like turning him aspect that I'm not a huge like fan of. But anyway, so those are the 24 Kindle romances that I have read so far. And I hope you enjoy this start off to Valentine's week. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're interested in more in any of these. I have reviews for some of them up there. And yeah, so I hope you will subscribe and hit that bell for more Valentine's week content. And I look forward to talking with you then. Bye!